Good evening, everyone. This evening, I will be talking again about Durga Mata and just many wonderful stories still that are of hers and of Master, and a little bit of Rajasi tonight. And this will probably be a continuation again next time I speak, which will be in a few weeks. But this evening it will focus primarily on relationship with Master and Durga. And let's begin with a prayer. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, and our beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda, Durga Ma, Rajasi. We invoke thy presence this evening. Help us to dive deep into the lives of you and your service to Master. May we feel your deep inspiration, your deep devotion to your Guru, to Divine Mother. We are thine. Come to us now. Om, peace. Amen. And we'll start with a chant. Brahmanandam Paramasugaram Kevalam Jnanamurti Dandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tatvarmasya Dilaksham Ekyam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvade Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Satguru Tvam Namami, full of bliss, giving joy transcendent of higher knowledge, the abode. Do all no more, clear as the heavens, known to all as thou art thou. He is pure, permanent, unmoving, the everlasting seer of all, far, far beyond qualities and thought. Guru Lord, I bow to thee. Guru Lord, I bow to thee. Oh, 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 oh. Nothing on earth can hold me. Rise on my soul in freedom. Nothing on earth can hold me. Rise on my soul in freedom. Rise on my soul in freedom. Nothing to fear anymore. Rise on my soul in freedom. Nothing to fear anymore. Nothing on earth can hold me. Rise on my soul in freedom. Nothing on earth can hold me. Rise on my soul in freedom. Rise on my soul in freedom. Nothing to fear anymore. Rise on my soul in freedom. Nothing to fear anymore. Nothing on earth can hold me. Rise, oh my soul, in freedom. Nothing on earth can hold me. Rise, oh my soul, in freedom. Rise, oh my soul, in freedom. Nothing to fear anymore. Rise, oh my soul, in freedom. Nothing to fear anymore. Nothing on earth can hold me. Rise, oh my soul, in freedom. Nothing on earth can hold me. Rise, oh my soul, in freedom. 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 So last week we talked about the beginning of Durga's life, her family, and just her beginning meetings with Master. And Durga moved to Mount Washington. And when she was there, she lived on the second floor, and there was a porch and a balcony outside of her room. And she loved to sleep on it. And but she would wake up in the mornings and her hair would be wet and her covers were wet, and it was because the fog was so thick. So Master said, he told her not to sleep outside anymore. Her body just couldn't take it. And so he told her not to stay away from any open windows as well. But she lamented the fact because above her was Master, and he slept also on the balcony. And she would hear his footsteps, and so she regretted not being able to stay out there any longer, but she obeyed him, of course. And one time Master told her, and a group of devotees, about one night he was out there and he looked over, and on the edge of the balcony he saw a figure standing there. And Master said it was a man. He was about 5 feet tall, and he was a Spaniard, and he was actually dressed in clothing of a soldier, complete with a sword. And he said to Master, he pleaded with Master to release him. And Master told him, he said, I cannot release you now. He said, but I will be the one that will release you, and when the time is right, I will do so. So Durga, in the very beginning days of her residency at Mount Washington, was in a meeting with several people. They sat in a circle around a fire, and Master leaned back on a few pillows, and he told a variety of stories. And then at one point it got late that evening, and he asked everyone to please leave and go ahead and retire for the evening, but he told Durga to stay. And so she sat there and she just looked at him. She's very quiet. And he looked at her and he said, Ma Durga. And he said, that's your name. He said, that was the name that you had, that I gave you in your last incarnation, and that you were in the hermitage in India with me, and you were also a sister then. And she said, well, she had actually asked him what it meant, and he didn't really tell her until many, many years later that it was that she was a previous incarnation with him in the temple. And she said an interesting thing. She said that Master only saw this life as a continuation of the last life. as if there was no break in between. So Durga right away started out as master's cook. He got her cooking immediately. And he had an apartment, and in that apartment there were 2 rooms. Well, no, he had an extra room that was used for storage. And he decided to convert that into a kitchen. It had a rug on the floor, and it had a lavatory. And she said the sink there was insufficient because Master insisted that all of his curries would have, he would put vegetables in his curries, and he insisted that they all be fried. And so the grease would then be poured down the sink, and she said the sink was constantly stopped up. And there was a stove that she used. It was a cooking stove, and it was run by gasoline, and it had to be pumped to keep it going. It would stop often, she said. So they had to continually pump it, and it would create a tremendous amount of smoke. And then they also had a few boxes, and there were wooden boxes, and one of them was used for them to sit on when they ate. And then one of the boxes was used for cutting vegetables on. And then there was a third box, and that was used for the stove. And she said that one of his disciples, she taught music lessons, private music lessons. And so she would leave, and she would teach her students. And she earned some money. And she came back, and eventually what she did was she earned enough money that she bought tile for the floor, or linoleum, and she also put some shelves in. And then eventually, over time, students bought for Master a new sink, a gas stove, and a table, a round table, and it had some chairs to it. And Durga said that his closest disciples would eat with him there. And that was until he actually left the body, that they would eat there every night for dinner when he was there. Durga she became Master's hostess when he would give services on Thursday and Sunday nights. And she received guests when they would come in, and then she would also work the book table. And Master said to her, remember that receiving guests is very, very important. He said, because you never know when God will come through the door. So Durga went on. She cleaned his apartment. She washed his clothes. She did his general housekeeping. She also packed and unpacked for him whenever he would travel. And Master said of her, "What words shall I say, dear Durga, for all that you have done for me, and that the work your hand is in, and the work, for all that you have done for me and the work. Your hand is in everything. I find everything in order." She actually was quite meticulous in her ability to organize. He said, "You would laugh to death if you could see what indescribable disorder that I have to put up with. Your method and complete obedience and order and doing things from reading my mind certainly spoiled me. Of course, who could cook for me better than you? Oh, how I miss your service. But of course, you can't give up the helm you have undertaken." Durga would often talk about the Christmases that they had at Mount Washington, and they were extremely joyful. Master would enjoy buying gifts for everyone, and he would start early in the year, and he'd be buying them all throughout the year. And one time she and Master had been out at a thrifty, I guess. It sounds to me like it's kind of like a Walgreens or at the time, well, I don't remember the name of the store, but there was there's kind of a, doesn't really matter. But that she looked in the window and she saw a teddy bear. And she told Master that her brother had a teddy bear when she was a child. And she said, and do you believe he would never let me play with it? And she said, and so I've carried that attachment with me. And then, of course, at Christmas time, she was just floored when Master gave her a box and she opened it, and in it was a teddy bear. So she handed it to Master and she asked him to bless it, and he took it and he held it at arm's length and he set it on his knee and he sat with it for a while. And then he handed it to Sister Mata and told her to sit with it. And so from that point on, that little teddy bear had been blessed. And Durga said that Master loved buying children's toys for his children. And she said he especially loved buying for his little one, Rajasi. And she also talked about, of course, the spiritual Christmas, the spiritual side of Christmas at Mount Washington, which was obviously very important. And I'm just going to read to you what that was like with Master. Having Christmas at the headquarters was a tradition. Master did not, nor would not, have Christmas anywhere else. The same applied to the Christmas all-day meditation. He started it on December 24th, 1932. It was such a beautiful spiritual event that Master made it a tradition. In later years, someone suggested that it would make it easier to decorate, finish wrapping, and prepare dinner, etc., if the meditation was on the 23rd, which is when we celebrate it. And after much persuasion, he condescended to have it on the 23rd once. That day, Jesus appeared to Master much more often than at any other previous times, and the experience was so great that Master definitely felt that the 23rd was more pleasing to Jesus than the 24th. Therefore, the 23rd was definitely established. Master set the pattern that is followed to this day. And when he prayed, the magnetism of his words penetrated our minds. And when he played on the harmonium and chanted, he pulled our hearts along with him to deeper depths. I played the big drum and Daya the cymbals. He would signal when he wanted us to play, and when he wanted us to play louder and faster. This became a tradition, as well as my singing Master's Divine Love Sorrow song. Those meditation days with Master were not only deeply imprinted in our conscious minds, but also in the archives of the subconscious and still deeper into the superconscious mind to eradicate numerous past, present, and I hope future psychological knots. We had to be quite unwell not to go to the meditation. I remember during meditation day, I contracted a severe cold. I was positively miserable all through the first part of the meditation period. And when the intermission came, I wrote Master a note stating my plight and asked him what I should do, hoping he would tell me to remain in my room and go to bed. When his answer came, it read, "Do whatever you think best." I never did anything without his consent. Therefore, I went back down to finish the rest of the meditation period. And when he saw me come in, he smiled. The cold misery did not bother me at all for the remainder of the time, though I could not join the downstairs celebration. Still, I put on a mask and joined his and our private Christmas under Master's tree. Whenever Master would mention that he saw Jesus, the hair on my body would stand on end and the vibrations were tremendous. Once, while we were singing Glory Hallelujah, I felt Jesus making a deep imprint of a cross on my forehead. And every time we sang that song thereafter, the same feeling of a cross on my forehead returns. Another time, I definitely felt Jesus' omnipresence in my heart
and soul, and in my mind. I was wondering if my feelings were real, and when Master spoke again, he said, "Some see Jesus, and I know others are feeling his omnipresence." I was satisfied to have my perception verified. The experiences during our all-day Christmas meditations with Master are too numerous and too deep to mention or express. The first of the two occasions I had to miss at Mount Washington was after Master's Mahasamadhi. I had to stay with Rajasi at Encinitas for the last of his X-ray treatments, fell on the 24th of December. It also happened that they had the all-day meditation on that date. It was an extremely sad day for me, for it was my first Christmas without our beloved Master in the flesh, and also absent from Mount Washington. Mrs. Lewis kindly put a very nice decorated tree in Rajasi's room, which I could see and enjoy. She had placed a pink rose on my dresser. I was so very sad that day, and seeing the rose instead of Christmas decorations, I felt awfully sorry for myself and mentally complained to Master, saying, "No decorations for me. The rose is not even a red rose." The thoughts had not been fully expressed when I heard Master's voiceless voice say, "Never mind, Dooj, I will give you a Christmas tree." After a few hours, Rajasi wanted some juices, and I sat on the end chair. And while we were seated there, I heard Master's voice from the living room hall coming from a record. Oh, this was too much for me to bear. I put my head on my arms, resting on the table, and gave vent to soul-searing sobs. Suddenly, in the spiritual eye appeared a vision of lights in the form of a beautiful, symmetrical tree. So quickly had Master fulfilled his divine promise of giving me a tree of my own, one that has and will remain with me the rest of my life. Not only did it satisfy my vision, but it also quenched the tears from my heart and soul, and as I felt the vibrations of the divine presence too. What blessings he bestowed on this empty shell, hollow without his presence, but filled to overflowing when he deems to fill it with the grace of his divine love. Since the departure of our beloved Master from this earthly abode, he makes himself felt throughout the holidays and is very definitely present among us. I know without the shadow of a doubt that he comes to the pure in heart and mind and fills the soul with his omnipresent love. So now Chaitanya will play for us and sing God, God, God. And there are several verses to it. You may not be familiar with them, but if you can sing the chorus, if you have the opportunity wherever you are to sing the chorus with him, it's a very deep song. Afterwards, we'll have a few moments of meditation, 10, 15 minutes.
From the depths of slumber as I ascend the spiral stairways of wakefulness, I will whisper, God, God, God. Thou art the food, and when I break my fast of nightly separation from thee, I will taste thee and mentally say, God, God, God. No matter where I go, the spotlight of my mind will ever keep turning on thee. And in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be God, God, God. When boisterous storms of trials shriek, and when worries howl at me, I will drown their noises, loudly chanting, God, God, God. When my mind weaves dreams, dreams, with threads of memories, on that magic cloth will I emboss God, God, God. Every night in time of deepest sleep, when my peace dreams and calls joy, joy, and my joy comes singing evermore, God, God, God. In waking, eating, working, dreaming, sleeping, serving, meditating, chanting, divinely loving, my soul will constantly hum, unheard by any. God, God, God.
Thank you, Chaitanya. That was absolutely beautiful. Durga said that they received, nope, I think I've lost that spot. Well, I'll tell you much as I can from memory, which is that Durga said at one point they didn't receive a salary, and that all the devotees would come together, and she said they had more fun than ever. Someone would say, oh, I have enough money for an ice cream cone, and they'd all go and get an ice cream cone, or I have enough money to go here or there. And she said at one point then Master, who would love to treat them, he would buy Eskimo pies, which, if for those of you who know what they are, they're chocolate-covered ice cream squares. And so Master he would love to do that. He would buy a box for them, and that would be their treat. And she said with every bite, there was a blessing. And then eventually their salaries increased, and they moved up to $1 a week, and then $5 a month, and finally, I guess at the time that the book was written, she said that everyone was making $25 or $20 a month, and the directors were making $25. But she said they did, and Rajasi, she said, was totally impressed with the fact that they were able to, in those days you could buy a dress for $1, of course, and that they would buy all their essentials, and he was very impressed by all of that. Of course, Rajasi's money, he could afford anything that he wanted. Well, at one point in time, Durga Master had been to India, and he brought back with him a replica of the Taj Mahal. And it was extremely fragile, very refined. And Master cautioned anyone who was driving him home, to be very careful when going over bumps because of it. And he was very, very, very proud of it and very protective of it. And so he brought it into his office, and it sat on his desk, and he wanted to show it to Rajasi. But he wanted to also show how it lit up. And so Rajasi came in, and he asked Durga to close the drapes. Well, as she did so, God bless her, she knocked over the statue, and she said, it sounded like it broke into 1,000 pieces. And she said, and I looked down, and it had broken into 1,000 pieces. Now, think about that. How many of us could have survived that moment? And she said, Master didn't say a word. And she said a few days later that she would fix it for him. And so she took it, and she, of course, thank God Durga had sculpting talents, but she took it and she pieced it back together, and she decided she could hold it together with plaster of Paris. So she did that, and any piece that had been completely broken, she was able to replicate. And then she took some wax, was it paraffin, and because parts of it were dull, and so she went over them with wax, and she was able at that point to bring it back to a semblance of something that Master felt okay about and that she felt okay about. And someone said, gosh, Durga, she can just do anything. And Master said, yes, Durga can do anything that she sets her mind to. And she could, she was someone that she just could do anything. She was a tailor. She was a seamstress. I mentioned this last time I spoke. She was a fantastic cook. I think she worked on cars. I mean, she really could do anything she set her mind to. Now, she had heard Master praise a man for doing over 100 kriyas. She calls it 100 kriyas. I think she meant 108 kriyas, Well, she heard Master praise this man for doing so many kriyas. So she thought, well, that's what she wanted to do because maybe it would please him. And so she said, gleefully, I said to him, Master, can I do 100 kriyas? And he said, are you crazy? And he shouted it, she said. And of course, she never asked again, but she said to him, well, you praised him. Why can't I? And he said, you do what you were told to do, no more. And, when you think about that, we're all kind of, I don't know that this would apply to most of us, because I think Master would always encourage us to do more kriyas. But with Durga, her nervous system must have been extremely refined, is all I can think of. And I was talking with Chaitanya earlier, and he made the comment that, well, maybe she would have left and never come back, which is also another possibility. But clearly, for her, and Master, when devotees would serve him so furiously, and, he would often meditate for them. But I think in Durga's case, I think it probably was just more than she really needed. And it either would have taken her away or would have done her more damage, brought up perhaps more physical karma for her. It's hard to say what Master was thinking. At one point, Durga was in a group of people, and she sat there, and she sat in front of Master. And Master all of a sudden began to focus on her gray hair, and he began to notice how much gray hair she had, and he just reached over and he pulled a gray hair out of her head. And then he pulled another one out, and he sat there for 2 hours pulling the gray hairs out of Durga's head. And she said that he made some comment about, see how many dark hairs she has now. And he said, I rid her of those gray hairs with my will. I have no idea how that made her feel physically, if that hurt her or not. But she said she never had another gray hair until after he had his Mahasamadhi. And then her gray hair started coming back in. So Master, at one point, she told her that she had in the past been a dancer in the temples, and that she also had been guillotined for having religious conviction. And Master used to like to watch her. She would eat an apple or a banana. And he said he would like to watch her eat it, because when she did so, she would take her 3 fingers, her index finger, her thumb, and the one next to it, the middle finger, and she'd put them together, and then her pinky and her ring finger would extend out. And it creates a mudra. And I think Master enjoyed seeing that because it reminded him of a past incarnation with her. In Encinitas, Master had his apartment, and Rajasi actually had built an apartment next to him, and Master was of course thrilled because it meant that he'd be there more often and he wouldn't be going back to Florida as much. And Durga finally settled. She had an area underneath. Durga, many of the nuns had been asked to leave their apartments whenever guests would come, and finally, Durga was able to get a place settled underneath Rajasi's apartment in the basement. And when she was in Encinitas, Master would be there, and then he would go to Mount Washington. And she would take several trips back and forth within the month.
And then he would send her back and forth to LA. And she would do errands for him. And she said, on one of these occasions, I had a very severe chest cold. And Master came down to my room. I can still see him now sitting on the chair. And he looked at me for a moment. And then he asked if I would go to Los Angeles to get something that he wanted for the temple from a store in LA. He added, Castillo will drive you. You can lie on the back seat and you can come right back. I agreed to go. After he left my room, he sent Woody to help me dress and get ready. I was tucked in with blankets, pillows, and laid on the back seat. Castillo was worried. I could see him watching me from his rear window, or his rear mirror. And when we got to LA, I went into the store. It only took a few minutes, and I came back and I took my former position on the back seat and went back to the Hermitage. By the time I got there, I was practically well. So obviously, Master sent her with the idea that if she just listened to what he said and just trusted in him, he would take care of her. Everyone would go to Durga, she said, asking what to buy Rajasi and Master for Christmas. And she said these were two people who had everything that they needed or wanted. So she would try to give suggestions. And Rajasi came to her once, and he never knew what to give Master. And he gave Durga money, and he just said, buy him whatever he needs. So Durga bought him a big gold chair. And I think to this day it is still in Mount Washington. And this was a chair that Master had an ecstasy in. And I can't do this justice. I'll have to read it to you. It was also in 1948 that we all experienced a very memorable incident. Master had an extremely deep ecstasy. One noon, around June 16th, I went to our small kitchen to eat. I sat down, but I couldn't eat. I left the table and I went directly to Master's room. He was sitting alone on the davenport, and I sat near him. He said, sit a little more distance away. Divine Mother doesn't want anyone to touch me. And he began to talk of his love for Divine Mother. One by one, each of the close disciples came. He told us later that he did not want to call anyone, that she would have to call those that she wanted herself, and she did. After I came, Durga Mata, Daya came, Mataji came, Salasutta came, and Woody. He had us call the Lewises to come too, and it was the first time that we had seen him in such a different ecstasy. He talked aloud to Divine Mother, and she would use his voice to answer him back aloud, so that we could hear it all. Divine Mother took each one by our names and would tell us what each one's faults were. And Master's tender heart would come to our defense. Daya took some notes. Divine Mother laid us low, and many others who were not present, according to each one's just desert. I remember my scolding very well. I had to give up my room either at Mount Washington or in particular Encinita for guests. A little while back, I was asked to give up my room at Mount Washington for a guest again, and for the first time, I made a fuss about it. Now, understand, this was the first time. This was probably the only time that Durga made a fuss about it, and Divine Mother called her to task. It wasn't like something that was a huge thing with her. It just shows the subtlety
of these great souls, and how the perfection, how Master worked diligently to eradicate any imperfection in them. Divine Mother was taking me on the carpet for that, saying Duj was selfish and wouldn't give her room up. Master answered, "Oh, please, Mother, don't punish her. She was always been unselfish and is my pal, and you know she takes on the sins of others. Don't punish her, Mother." Swami Kriyananda was very much like that as well. If it came down to loyalty, Swami was incredibly loyal to those that were close to him and to his friends, which is a lot of people. But he was incredibly loyal, as was Master. Each one, without exception, got a lesson we never forgot. Can you imagine what this did to make us deeply remorseful? We cried so much and for so long that we were as listless as could be. And after 3 days and nights of this crying and hearing all these conversations from Master to Divine Mother and vice versa, I had to go to Encinitas overnight. He continued his talking in the same manner while I was gone. Early that morning, Daya called me to say that I had better come immediately, for they feared that Master was going to leave the body. I drove so fast that I made it in a short time. I did not feel the driving at all, and when I said to him, "I'm sorry I was not here last night," he looked at me and he answered, "You were here. I saw you." And one or more of us were in constant attendance night and day. One day while I was working in the office, Master got a letter from one of the office workers complaining about my actions and added that I had no education and I was ignorant. And when he read the note to me, I answered that she was right. I have no education. He very indignantly answered, "You may not have an education, but you are not ignorant. Look at me. I don't know English beyond the parts of speech, but look what the Lord is writing through me. Someday you will write." I did not realize how much this note had hurt him, because someone had called one of his children ignorant, until this one night when I was taking my turn in attendance to Master during his great ecstasy. I sat on the floor, and he began to dictate to me. I only had a very small crack from the closet light to light my pad, and I had to take it in longhand. He dictated for a very long time. At the end of the dictation, he said, and I quote, June 20th, 1948, "An ignorant but loving God secretly was chosen to take this dictation from intellectual ignorant myself." He also said, "Divine Mother wanted me to dictate to you all this to prove to that person that you are not ignorant because you are the one who is taking this down, not she." I still have my original handwritten notes as well as the typewritten transcription, which I typed immediately in order not to forget what he had dictated, and while my notes were still fresh in my mind. At this time, Master did not care to eat, not even mangoes, which he loved so well. For weeks after, the least little reminder would recall his ecstatic samadhi. His dear body was suffering someone else's pain. As he stood to go out of the room, his body swayed, and I quickly held him so he would not fail or fall. As I did so, I deeply prayed that Divine Mother would pass his suffering into me. Several days later, I came down with the same symptoms that he had, and his body was relieved. On July 1st, around 5 o'clock in the morning, I felt a tremendous shaking of my body. It felt like a chill, but it was something far more severe and different. I tried to call Mrs. Wright, who was looking after me and who lived across the hall, but I could not get any response. The shaking became more violent. I told myself, "You must control this, or it will run with you, or run away with you."
The violence ceased, but it came back at intervals. And later that morning, when Mataji came to see how I was for Master, I told her of my experience, and she in turn told Master. He came to my door with a mask on. I begged him, "Please, sir, you better not come in. This might be contagious, and I wouldn't want you to get it." He remained in the doorway. As I asked him what the shaking was, he answered, "It was the life force trying to leave your body." I further said, "Any time Divine Mother wants to take me, I am ready to go." And he sadly looked at me and he said, "No, you have a lot of work to do yet." Blessed Guruji again saved this shell from leaving this world. He had his reasons, and I now know them very clearly, too. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light. I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light. I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light. I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light. I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love. I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy love. I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy. I am joyful, I am free, free, I awake in thy joy. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light. I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light. I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light. I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light. Mother, I give you my soul, soul, soul. Come. You can't remain hidden anymore. You can't remain hidden anymore. Give my mother a soul, soul. Come. You can't remain hidden anymore. You can't remain hidden anymore. Come out of the silent sky. Come out of the mountain glen. Come out of the silent sky. Come out of the mountain glen. Come out of my secret soul, Mother. Come out of my secret soul. Come out of my cave of silence. Come out of my cave of silence. Mother, I give you my soul, soul. Come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen, come out of my secret soul, Mother, come out of my secret soul, come out of my cave of silence, come out of my cave of silence, come out. Silent sky, come out of the mountain glen, come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen, come out of my secret soul, Mother, come out of my secret soul, come out of my cave of silence, come out of my cave of silence. Mother, I give you my soul, 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 call. She can't remain hidden anymore. You can't remain hidden anymore. Give my mother a soul, soul, call. She can't remain hidden anymore. You can't remain hidden anymore. Come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen, come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen, come out of my secret soul, Mother, come out of my secret soul, come out of my cave of silence, come out of my cave of silence, out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen, come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen, come out of my secret soul, Mother, come out of my secret soul, come out of my cave of silence, come out of my cave of silence. Mother, I give you my soul, soul. Let's have a brief meditation.
Master, in 1936, gave Durga the task of looking after Rajasi, his personal comforts, and his welfare while he was at Encinitas in Mount Washington. And she said, well, why me? And he said that when he first met Rajasi was telling him of his living situation and his servants and how many he had, and the service that they gave him, his home life, and so forth. And so Master at that point saw Durga and her face next to Rajasi's. And he told Rajasi that someday, he said, I will show you what real service is like. And he knew then that Durga Mata would help him help Rajasi. And Master said to her, he said to Durga, I expect much from you. He said, but don't worry, because I will be there with you every step of the way. I'll be there to protect you. And you mustn't let me, and you mustn't let Divine Mother down. And Durga said that he watched over her and he directed her physically, psychologically, and most important, spiritually. And for Rajasi, she cooked, she shopped, she packed, unpacked when he traveled. She said he was meticulously clean, and so she had to keep his home spotless. She said she mopped floors, cleaned windows, dusted, vacuumed, polished furniture, and that he, when he was there, he had to have his bed sheets changed every single night. And he loved fresh air. So Durga said that the windows were wide open all the time. It was colder than any other place in Encinitas, she said. And so she could barely tolerate the cold after a while. So what she would do is she would wear a house coat, and it kind of reached down by her ankles. And Master saw her one sometime, and he said, why are you wearing that? He said, it looks strange. And she said, well, she said, most of everyone else wears pants. She said, I'm not going to wear that. I'm not going to wear pants. He said, it looks funny. And so one day he actually came over to meditate, and he said, he told Durga to get his shawl. And he said, it's so cold in here. And she said, well, that's because he keeps the windows wide open all the time. And she said from that point on, Master never said anything else to her about the house coat. Let's have a few more moments of silence, and then we'll end with a prayer. let's pray together. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, great masters of East and West, beloved Yogananda, and dear Durga Ma, thank you for being with us this evening and within our lives, especially Durga. We are deeply grateful now for your writings, for your vulnerability, for your openness in conveying your experiences and bringing us closer and closer to our Divine Master and to Divine Mother. Om. Peace. Amen. And as I mentioned earlier, the next time I'll probably talk more about Rajasi, his life. And Durga served him for almost 20 years. So there's a lot that she had to convey. God bless you all. Have a wonderful evening. Jai Guru. Jai Durga.